Welcome, everyone, to another Prevail Compliance Corner. I am Orly Burlov.
And I'm Noel Vestal. Hello, everyone.
Hey, I feel like there should be some cue music. Da, 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 da,
Like,
da. Yeah.
we need a theme song or something. We need some sort of like little ditty, like, I don't know.
All right. So we're here today to talk about DFARS 7012, safeguarding covered defense information and cyber incident reporting. We've done previous webinars, and we'll link to them in the show notes. Not webinars, but recordings on DFARS 7019 and 7020. And I realize we've been remiss because we don't really have one on 7012, which is really kind of where this whole nursery rhyme starts. So, why don't we just get started and say, first of all, what DFARS 7012 stands for, and then I'll give the outline for today's discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give a quick understanding, because there are FARS, F-A-R, and DFARS, D-F-A-R-S.
Right.
So, okay.
Yeah.
A FAR, yeah, it's like, because you have to understand a FAR to really understand a DFAR. A FAR is is a federal acquisition regulation. That means it applies to the whole government.
Right.
And then a DFAR is the same thing, federal acquisition regulation, but with defense in the front of it. So it's specific to the DoD.
Gotcha.
So DFARS 70, it's actually 252.204, I think. Anyway, the 7012 part is the part that people care about. So the DFARS 7012 is it actually came out in 2017, like the very end of 2017. And it was to assist, I'm going to use the positive word.
When you say that.
It was to assist, yes, the defense industrial base with, guidance for how they should secure their controlled unclassified information. I'm going to put a positive, happy face to it.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good morning. We're talking about DFARS and defense.
Yay!
Okay, so now that we understand what a DFARS versus a FAR is, so we're going to jump into talking about DFARS 7012. So we'll define it. We'll say what the standard involves, what meeting DFARS 7012 takes, consequences of not meeting it. That's always a nice little caveat. And the steps you need to take to facilitate your compliance with 7012. All right, so 7012, it's been around since 2017, as you said. It was created in order to help the DoD better ensure cybersecurity for defense contractors. And its purpose is pretty clear from the meaning: safeguarding covered defense information and cyber incident reporting.
Yep.
So who does it 7012 apply to? Let's talk about that.
That is an excellent question. Simple answer is, if you have a contract with the DoD and there is a DFARS 7012 clause, meaning like DFARS 7012 is listed in your contract that you signed with the DoD, then it applies to you. If you are a subcontractor who works for a prime and the prime tells you, hey, you have a flow down requirement, which, that's going back to like the 7019, 7020 stuff that we talked about before. If you have a flow down, hey, you have a flow down requirement because you work for us. And we as the prime have a 7012 clause in our contract with the DoD. And we have a 7019, 7020 clause that gives the flow down to you. Right. So those are the people that it would apply to directly or indirectly.
And so, I'm a defense contractor. Let's create that scenario for Acme Corp. And my prime tells me, we have a 7012 clause. And so that means you, Buster, need to start complying with it. So let's talk about the three things. I mean, there are a lot of things, but let's talk about the three main things that a 7012 clause requires you to do. What is the burden that you suddenly take on?
Yes. And
I asked that question.
I'm so glad, because there's so much to talk about here. So the first one, and the big one that you're going to hear talked about so often, is compliance with the NIST 800-171 framework. The NIST 800-171 framework, and for those of you who don't know what NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And they put out a whole bunch of different frameworks of like, this is how you protect this. This is how you do that when it comes to technology. And they came out with the NIST 800-171 framework. This was a long time ago. I think the first iteration was like 2011 or 2012. So it's been around for a while. And it is a list of currently 110 controls, because we're on revision 2 of it right now. And it's currently 110 controls that you have to address. So it's things like you have to have a password policy, and you have to manage your endpoints, and you have to have incident response and training. And there's all kinds of different things in it.
Yes.
It consists of multiple families. I think it's 14 or 15 at this point, and 110 controls. So there's also 320 objectives that are inside of that. So each control has multiple objectives that, roll up to the control.
Right.
We also have more. And again, if you want more information on that, we have other videos on that. However, you are now responsible either, as Acme Corps, right? Because your prime has said, hey, you have to do this. You are now responsible for adhering to those 110 controls and making sure that you are actually doing all of the things those controls ask for. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it, if you are using a cloud service provider, for example, Prevail is a cloud service provider, but there's so many other ones. Anyone who is doing a cloud service where you are using or utilizing their solution as part of your safeguarding of CUI,
right,
they are considered a cloud service provider that you are using in conjunction with the contract, which means in conjunction with the expectations of 7012, which are a cloud service provider has to be either FedRAMP moderate baseline authorized, like on the marketplace to work with the government, or they have to be like what we are, which is a FedRAMP moderate baseline equivalent.
Right.
Which basically means we do exactly the same thing that FedRAMP authorized people do. We just don't have an authorization because we're not working with the government directly.
Right.
That's it.
And I thought that was actually an interesting little note to make. And I'll just, for the sake of driving it home, restate it. In order to be FedRAMP moderate, not equivalent, but FedRAMP moderate, you have to have an ATO, an authority to operate, which means you have a direct contract with the DoD or a government agency, any government agency.
Or you're going to. So So you have to have, in order to start the process, you have to have a sponsor, but it has to be a government agency that sponsors you. And the idea being that they're going to sponsor you so that they can then buy your stuff.
So if you don't have that situation going on, then you can't get FedRAMP moderate. So you have to get called FedRAMP moderate equivalent, which
precisely.
is
exactly. Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's the difference. So, and FedRAMP moderate equivalent is something that is not a super easy thing to do, just so everybody's aware. FedRAMP in general is not easy to do. No. So yeah, that's something that you want to be very sure that if you are using a cloud service provider, that they have all the documentation to prove to you that they are moderate equivalent. If they are not, then you should not use them in any way for protection of CUI, because they are not going to be a good idea for sure. Yeah,
so what's number 3?
Number 3 is a relatively easy one compared to the other two. So the third part, what that's talking about is what is referred to as DFARS 7012 paragraph C through G. So if you look at paragraph C through G, and I will save you C through G. Yeah.
Okay. C
through G. Through G. Yeah, there you go. So a little bit of sign language today. So C through G. What paragraph C through G say basically this is a very high level. If you want to actually look into it, please, I encourage you to go read it yourself. But at a very high level, it's talking about incident reporting. So if and when you have some sort of security incident, a spillage of CUI, or, some server is compromised, whatever it is, you are agreeing, when you sign that contract with that 7012 clause, you are agreeing to paragraph C through G, stating that you will contact the DoD in the way that they want, which is through the DIBnet and DC3, and there's all this reporting stuff in there. Again, go read it. You will report it the way they want you to report it. You will work with the DoD in any way that they need in their investigation, in any way. You will also take an image capturing of the affected server. So like if there's any kind of spillage like that, you will take an image of it, and you'll keep that for, I think it's like 90 days. And you will make sure that your cloud service provider does the same thing. Your cloud service provider is not going to contact the DoD on your behalf. That is your job. However, the parts where like the server has like an image capturing and they hold on to it and they agree to work with the DoD and everything else, that part is essential as well, not only to you as the subcontractor, but also to any cloud service provider you are using. So like, for example, we have a letter that we send out that says, yes, we comply with paragraph C through G of 7012. If you don't get that from a cloud service provider, you could be in a situation where you are in violation of the 7012 clause.
So it's an important thing to note because a lot of commercial services, for example, Microsoft Office, just their commercial flavor, or G Suite's commercial, they cannot meet those. So it's an important thing to make sure you're able to get to.
Yes, you want to get that validation because you don't want to be in a situation, believe me, you do not want to be in a situation where you have an incident and the DoD starts investigating and you tell them, oh, sorry, we can't give you what you need.
Yeah, the DoD doesn't have a sense of humor about this.
They do not.
Cue out the siren.
Yeah. Yeah, not good. You don't want that. No. And then remember too that this is a callback to our 7012, the DFARS 7012 video that we did as well. If they come in and see something fishy at any time, they can come in and audit you. So
you mean our 70, you're talking about our 7019 or 7020 video? You said
7020 video. 7019 is this first one. Yeah, 7020. Sorry. I'm sorry. Whatever I said. 7020. So if you have a 7020 clause, if your prime does as well, again, you're in a situation where if they come in and they start investigating and they find things that are a little questionable, they can then do a whole investigation as well.
All right.
So, don't want that.
So let's start with a Latin term, segue. Let's segue into how 7012 moves with 7019, 20, and 21, right? I've called them siblings, like in a family.
Yep.
7012 might be the big brother, and 7019, 20, and 21 are the younger siblings, but they're also really important.
Definitely.
As our younger siblings. I am a younger sibling in any family. So let's just talk really quickly. 7012, how does that intersect, let's say, with 7019? Let's start there.
Yeah. So 7012 and 7012, remember, was the first, right? So like you said, that's sort of like the big brother or, the older auntie or uncle or something, right? So 7012 is all the things we just talked about, but the biggest part of it obviously is adhering to NIST 800-171. So when it first came out, everybody was like, oh yeah, okay, sure, I'm totally doing 800-171.
Totally.
I
say like a teenager. Totally.
Right. But yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, of course. And then the government figured out very quickly that there's no mechanism for them to actually, gather that information from those organizations, which is where 7019 comes in. 7019 said, okay, yeah, so you have to do these 800, the 800-171 controls. But now 7019 comes in saying, but you have to now report it to the DoD in the SPURS system. So DoD was like, great, now we at least know what they're telling us, what they're attesting to doing in their compliance program. Then they realized, well, yeah, but they could tell us anything. They could be like, yeah, I'm 110 out of 110. Everything's great. Woo, Exactly. Because why not? Why wouldn't they? Then they come out and they're like, okay.
Conservation.
Exactly. Then they come out and they say, okay, well, we've got to have a mechanism to check on them.
Right.
And it's where 7020 comes in. 7020 stating we can come check on you whenever we want to without any notice and check and make sure that number that you have in SPURS that you reported to us based on your 7012 requirement of NIST 71. Yes.
You don't let them in. Do they huff and puff and say they'll blow your house down?
It wouldn't surprise me, honestly. It really wouldn't. But 7020 is that's what it is. It's we're coming to go check on everything. We can check on you whenever we want to. We can look at this and make sure that you're keeping our information safe. Then 7021 is the CMM. That was the next level because they had all those three out there and they're thinking, okay, well, this is great. There's still people out there who are inadvertently or intentionally lying to the DoD about what their compliance status is. So now that's where CMMC comes in, which is like the very, very last, like the very youngest of all the siblings, the little baby, who is just that validation mechanism. So everything's already in place. You already have to do all of this stuff. Right. All CMMC is literally just validating through like an organization, a third party that you actually are doing this.
Yeah, that's Stacy Bostianic said on our October webinar. I think it was our October webinar. That CMMC is just a substantiation of the requirements you are already supposed to meet.
Exactly. That's something that people forget a lot of the time is that CMMC is only an avenue. It is a mechanism to get your 7012 stuff in order. That's it. It is to double check you and make sure you're actually doing what contractually you have been supposed to be doing for the while now.
The while? Is that
like a while? So while. There's so much while.
Are we so close that we're creating our own community and our own speech?
I love it. We're having our own little dialogue. Our vernacular is
the while. This is something you should have doing the while. How long is the while?
In this case, like 6 years.
Yeah.
So, really should have been on that.
So to the wilds is 12 years?
Apparently, yeah. So you just like do it in like iterations. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So, so now we know.
For the while.
Yes. So everyone who has those 7012, 7019, 7020 clauses is supposed to be doing all that stuff already. When CMMC becomes law, then the 7021 clause will be added to then prove that you're doing all those things and to validate it. But you already are supposed to do it anyway. It's already a requirement now because it's already in contracts now.
All right. I think we have two things we should kind of note, and I'll say them in order. First being the consequences of not meeting 7012, and then we should finish up with the steps to facilitate your compliance. Yeah. But that first one about consequences of not meeting 7012, those can be kind of severe.
I would not want
the DoD not having a sense of humor. I think they just didn't watch enough comedy shows growing up or something.
Maybe that's what it is. I don't, but there's just
the funny bone was taken out at birth.
There you go. That's how you have to work for the DoD. Just the funny bone is removed. Oh, good to know. Okay. Well, sorry, DoD. We don't mean it. We don't mean it. I have worked for many very entertaining people who have worked for the DoD in my life, but they do take this seriously, and they should, because this is cyber security for the entire nation in a lot of these cases. I mean, this is the entirety of the United States. National security is dependent in many, 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 many ways on the contractors that work in the DIB and who work with the United States government and with the DoD. So yes, the DoD does not have a sense of humor about this specific sort of thing. So if let's say, for example, that you have a situation where your contract is modified and your core KO, it now has the ability or the expectation.
Contracting officer?
So a contracting officer. Yep. A contracting officer is a KO. A core is a contracting officer representative.
Okay.
And it just, thank you for that. I use a lot of acronyms. I appreciate you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So if your core or your KO says, okay, we have to do a contract mod, or if you need to do a contract mod, you say to them, I need to do a contract mod for a million reasons, right? There's so many different reasons. And if you go ahead and do that, then at this point, as of, June of 2022, where the June DoD memo came out, that basically stated that your cores and KOs and anyone who's responsible for your contract on the government side is supposed to double check you. Basically, okay, I'm going to look in SPRS and see what your number is. Okay, you listed 110. Well, let me see your SP, your SSP. Like, let me look at that and actually, prove that you really are. Like, if I look at that and I say, there's no way this is 110, I'm going to get a little fishy about it. Right. And at that point, the core of the KO can contact the DIBCAC, which is the DoD's, auditing arm, and say, hey, I don't think these people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's one way. You can have a whistleblower internally. There are some good rewards for whistleblowers, which we'll talk about in a second. Someone internally in your organization can blow the whistle and have somebody come in to do it. There's also opportunity. There's so many different ways that it could conceivably happen that somebody could stumble on that information. So it suffices to say, don't be this person.
Don't be that guy.
Put up there. Don't be that guy. So that's the first thing.
DNA test and make sure you're not that guy.
You're not that guy. 100% not that guy. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that you do get investigated. Okay, somebody comes in, and the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to ask for SSP, any policy document, all your documentation. They're going to look at it. If they look at that, again, compared to the SPRS score, they're going to be like, something doesn't make sense. They will then come and do what they call a DIBCAC, like on-site assessment, like a DIBCAC high assessment. DIBCAC high assessment. When they come on site, they're going to do a full assessment of everything, interview people. They're going to look at all of your documentation. They're going to look at your evidence, if you have any. And they're going to say, okay, well, you said 110. There is no way. You're at like a negative 25. Like this is so far off.
Right.
What they will then do is they will make a list of all the ways that you have made mistakes, the controls that you have not addressed. So every control that you don't address out of the 110, they will make note of that.
That's every writing on the blackboard. I have done this sin. I have done this.
Every objective they can go down to the objective level as well, which is something people don't know. They can go down to those 320 objectives and those 110 controls. And for every violation, individual violation they find and like can support is $11,000 that you could get sued for by the government.
Do you think at the end of that, Noel, you've had a really bad day?
Oh no, because it gets worse. Oh. So not only is it $11,000,
it gets
much worse. Not only is it $11,000 per incident, and again, it can be, the 110 controls, the 320 objectives, like whatever they find. It also, they can sue you to up to 3 times the total amount of the contract. So if you have a contract that is, let's say the total amount is $5 million, they can sue you to upwards of $15 million on top of the $11,000 per incident.
Take a DNA test. Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. Also, the other thing to remember, and I've said this so many times to different customers and people I've talked to, I have watched companies crumble from just the whiff of the possibility that they were not in compliance. Like just having the DIBCAC investigate you or ask you any of that stuff, that can honestly be so detrimental to your business that you just don't even, aside from all the money they can get from you, the absolute devastation to your reputation, do not do that. Yeah. It is not worth it.
Smoke is worse than the fire.
It really,
just bad.
I think they're both pretty terrible, but just don't do it.
Yeah. Don't start the fires.
Indeed.
All right. So after giving that stern warning, Miss Vestal, why don't we talk about and close this out with the things you need to do to facilitate your compliance? And I like to kind of break this down. So let's just talk about it in terms of numbers. What is the first thing you should do?
Yeah. So the first thing that you should be doing is deciding if you even have any CUI, if you even have this requirement. You may not have a 70-12 requirement. Maybe you sell commercial off-the-shelf stuff and you're like, oh, just kidding. I don't really need to do this.
Right.
Make sure you actually read your contract. Oh my goodness. Please read your contracts. Please. If you are not the one with the contract, talk to your prime and say, hey, are there any clauses that affect us? Are there things I should know? These are good conversations to have. You should really be very, very, very familiar with your contract. And then if you do have a 70-12 clause, you need to start making those actions to identifying where your CUI is, where you're going to keep it, what you're going to do with it, who's going to have access to it, all the things that you need to think about. And then also start addressing all of those controls. It's a lot of work, but the sooner you do it, the better off you're going to be.
And develop an SSP to do that.
Yes. And please make an SSP. And make sure that you have a SPURS score. If you do not have a score in SPURS and you're required to because there's a 70-19 contract, or a 70-19 clause, get on that too. So there's a lot of things you need to do before you really start diving into the compliance part. But for sure, read your contract.
I think my brother said they had a term for, just read the freaking manual. RTFM.
Please do. Please.
He told me F stood for freaking, and so I believe him.
I like it. We're going to go with that.
Yeah. So let's just, numbers. So check to see if you have a 70-12 clause.
Yes.
See where you're keeping CUI.
Yes.
And try and minimize that scope. Make sure, number 3, make sure you develop an SSP so you can detail how you meet the 110 requirements. Am I at 4 now?
Yeah. And and then actually address all of your controls, right? You have to address that stuff and get it done. This is something that has to be done. This is not something that is I might do that later. No, you have to do it. You have to do it.
Now. Yep. And make sure you meet FedRAMP. I guess that would be 5, and C through G, that's 6. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right. And we talked about doing another episode after this on, steps to just facilitate compliance. And so that'll be what we talk about on our next episode. So subscribe to our channel. Enjoy. I hope you enjoyed listening to this. You want to say goodbye to everyone, Noel?
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.